Hey, I'm Charlie Shield.
And I'm Neil King.
And you're listening to Living Planet. So a few weeks ago, we put an episode out about rats.
One rat actually crossed my foot, like ran over my foot.
When people ask me, what do I do about the rats, sometimes I say, well, first let's hold up a mirror, okay? Let's see how you live, let's see how you waste, let's see what you eat.
About how rats are on the rise in cities around the world and what role we humans play in their population spikes. Did it make you look at rats differently, Neil?
It certainly did,
Yeah?
to be honest. I mean, I never really disliked rats, but I also wouldn't really want them around the house either. But having listened to the episode, it made them way more relatable and far more, I don't know, I feel more for them now. You know, I think I've got the rat's perspective now.
I also look at rats differently now. I don't think I was really thinking about them that much before I did the episode. And I was fascinated by what I found. And I also found myself walking around Berlin suddenly desperate to see a rat during the research phase. It didn't happen until just before publishing. I spotted one down by the canal. We made eye contact and we had a moment, I think. Anyway, so we wanted to revisit this episode about rats because you sent us your rat questions and because there was one perspective that we didn't quite have room for last time. A researcher studying urban rats in Helsinki, where the rat story looks a little bit different.
The more I study rats in Helsinki, the more I think Helsinki is not New York.
And Neil, if you have any lingering ratty questions, we're going to get to those at the end.
Yeah, I think I may have one or two, but yeah, as you said, we'll do that at the end.
Okay, I look forward to it.
There's actually also one other thing, because I thought was also interesting, because the story, right, it puts you on track to talk to, can I call him the rat whisperer? Is that going too far? Bobby?
No.
I mean, the amazing guy, right? Because, just for anybody listening to this right now, you really should go back, listen to Charlie's episode. It's really worth it just to listen to Bobby, who's been studying rats all his life, and you can say he is the rat whisperer. Well
Pretty
done.
much, yeah.
Excellent. Anyway, just wanted to get that in there, sorry. But I also wanted to add here at the top that we've received some other feedback and voice messages from you, our audience, recently. And, for example, here's a message we received from Linda in the US.
Hi, my name is Linda, and I'm calling about the episode of Pray or Act. This was a great episode. I've actually already listened to it twice, so taking some notes. I am a Jesus follower. I do not like to call myself an evangelical because of the political connotation that comes with that. I'm a flawed Jesus follower, so trying to do my best. I'm also dumbfounded, and I'm so glad that you addressed this today as to why our church leaders aren't doing more, because it is what we are commanded to do as believers. I am a part of a non-denominational Earth Care team where our focus is taking care of the planet. So great episode. Thank you so much for bringing this up. I hope that you have more like that to encourage evangelicals, people who say they're believers, to actually act like a believer and to follow what Jesus told them to do, which is to love people and also in Genesis to be good stewards of our planet.
And thank you very much to Linda for that message. Twice she listened to the episode.
Yeah, that's really sweet. We love hearing from you. We love hearing your ideas and your feedback. So please keep sending it through. You can do that by sending us voice messages by going to dw.com/livingplanet and just pressing record. Or you can always do it the old school way and write us an email, as some of you did for the rat episode. So let's get started. I've picked out a couple of rat questions to address up the top. Neil, could I get you to read this first one?
Sure. So, hi, I just wanted to make a comment on this episode. Rats do not carry the plague. Fleas do. And fleas are on most furry mammals. Also, there is no mention of rat poison killing our beloved pets, let alone just wildlife. I am a huge animal lover and work in animal hospitals for over 20 years. We see pets that have eaten the poison alone, and dogs and cats eat mice and rats, and obviously ones who have had poison are easier to catch. They die very quickly, and it's a terrible death. Maria.
So thank you for sending us your thoughts, Maria. First of all, yes, pets do die horrible deaths from eating rat poison, either by eating the rats that have consumed the rat poison via secondary toxicity, or straight up eating the poison itself, because often it can be an attractive flavour for dogs and cats as well as rats. So unfortunately, there aren't really good statistics on how many pets die from rat poison, so it is kind of hard to get a grip on the scale of the impact it's having. But I did find that the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals lists rodenticide as one of the top 10 pet toxins of 2025. So I think we can, assume that they eat it fairly often.
Yeah, and there's also reports of kids eating it, in creches sometimes, and there have been deaths even. So, putting out rat poison, not necessarily a good idea.
Huge risk, yeah. So, yes, while it is certainly a problem among pets and sometimes also among humans, it does have to be said that the research shows it is a much bigger problem among wildlife. This stuff is killing a lot of birds, like raptors and owls, as well as wolves, foxes, skunks, and coyotes. So I had a bit of a research and I found just a couple of study examples.
One was a study that found that 83% of raptors sent to wildlife recovery centres in Portugal between 2017 and 2024, 83% of these raptors had at least one type of rat poison in their liver. Another study from 2024 surveyed 365 coyote carcasses in Southern California and found that 98.1% of urban coyotes had been exposed to at least one type of rat poison.
That's crazy.
Like
That
almost
means
100%.
It's all over the place then.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think it's sort of difficult to really wrap our heads around just how serious this problem is, because there are also probably a lot of wild animals that die that go unnoticed and unrecorded.
I think it's also really important just to point out here that, we as humans, we think we're solving a problem by putting out, rat poison. But in the end, it's actually got all these ripple effects. We don't necessarily see them. And we're causing major issues, ecologically. And we're probably most people are unaware of that. They're thinking, well, we're just dealing with the rats.
Yeah.
But we're not.
Yeah, exactly. So the EU and the US have been trying to regulate this. In the US, these poisons are regulated by the EPA. It's not quite as strict as Europe, but scientists have been pressuring government agencies to better regulate it. And in 2023, they brought in new restrictions. In California, they've tightened the rules. And it's an ongoing battle for conservation scientists to try and ramp down the use of rodenticides because they're having these devastating ripple effects.
But isn't it also a losing battle? Because, rats, they're just, the populations, they can grow really fast. And, that's why we have these infestations in cities, right? It's like, would it even solve the problem if we went all out with the poison?
Yeah, well, it doesn't seem to. And, if we go back to episode 1, Bobby, he's been studying this for decades and he's a huge advocate for prevention over poison. How are these rodents being attracted to the space? And making a home in which they can breed profusely. Okay, so now to the fact check that Maria brought up. Rats do not carry the plague. Fleas do. Or do they? Neil, what do you say?
Well, yeah, to be honest, initially I also always thought that it was, the fleas on the rats that were transmitting the plague to humans because they ended up biting the humans. So that also was my understanding just from, what I'd read about the Black Death in Europe. But
yes. So what I said in the original episode was that rats can carry the plague among other diseases, which remains true. They can become infected with Yersinia pestis. Should have practiced that.
I can't help you there, I'm sorry.
They can become infected with and carry Yersinia pestis. That is the bacterium that causes the plague. They carry this without becoming sick. So they're like reservoirs of this disease. And so when fleas bite infected rats, they pick up and carry the disease. But more recent research has actually suggested that rats and their fleas might not have played as big a role in spreading the plague as we traditionally thought at all. So various peer-reviewed scientific research published in 2013, 2018, 2022 has concluded that it's more likely the plague was spread between humans by human fleas and body lice, because there are human fleas and there are rat fleas. Fleas that like to bite rats, fleas that like to bite humans. And the researchers found that the sharp, short-lived spike in deaths that defined the plagues, that kind of best fit with the human parasite model, because the rat flea-driven plague, they hypothesize, would have resulted in fewer deaths spanning over a longer period of time.
Mm-hmm. Now, you see, I didn't even know that there were two different types of fleas.
Yeah.
That one were with the rats, one with the humans. So I think it almost cries for an episode on fleas. Let me just try and get this straight then. So that means they were all carrying the plague, but the rats also died of plague. They had their own fleas who transmitted it among the rats.
Mm-hmm.
And they were kind of separate from the humans who also had the plague and their fleas. And the fleas were transmitting the plague from humans to humans.
Yes.
Okay.
I think it must have jumped over at some point, right?
Okay. Interesting. Okay. Wow. So the bottom line is we all instinctively blamed the rats. It was the rats, right?
Yeah. And Bobby also said something interesting when I interviewed him about the animosity between humans and rats. And he said that he thinks it goes all the way back to the cave times when rats figured out that living alongside humans was their best bet at survival, because there was warmth, shelter, and food being stored or either, discarded. Mm-hmm. And so it was like this competitive kind of dynamic between humans and rats. And he said that ever since then, we've kind of been like, anti-rat, get away from us, stop stealing our stuff.
Yeah. You kind of also start hating stuff because it might have similar behavior patterns to yourself, right? So it's almost like we're not just competing, it's like we see ourselves in the rats.
Yeah. No, definitely. I think that's a good point. And I think that will come up again later, actually, in the episode. And we've got some more questions coming up after this short break.
Hi, I'm Kate Laycock, host of DW's weekly European current affairs programme Inside Europe. Our correspondents were there when the Berlin Wall fell, when the Balkans Wars broke out, and when Britain voted to leave the European Union. Now the continent is changing again, and we're rising to the challenge, bringing you a combination of expert analysis and on-the-ground reporting. Join us every Thursday.
Now to the second comment/question about rats. Neil?
I get to read this one again. Okay. This one is from Ray in Australia. I've just been listening on ABC Radio to your Living Planet show on rats in urban environments. It made me think that, however odious the comparison, there seems to be some similarities between rats and humans. We humans like living in large groups, like cities, and growing our numbers uncontrollably. We also leave volumes of waste wherever we go, even to the moon and Mars. Could you consider a program on what should be a suitable number of humans to inhabit our planet and how to attain that, short of wars and eugenics?
Well, we'll start with the first bit. Humans are kind of like rats.
Yeah.
Were you thinking that while you were listening?
Well, no, I mean, to be honest, my first reaction that, it is a bit of a tricky question, tricky terrain for a number of reasons. First of all, and of course, our listener, I don't think Ray meant to make this comparison. And, I believe the question's perfectly innocent and just, a thought experiment. But since, we're DW and Germany's international broadcaster, I think it's really important to note that any reference to limiting or controlling human population, does have a certain ring to it in Germany. And it kind of sets alarm bells off because of Germany's past. So I think it's really worth noting here that the Nazis, they not only wanted to exterminate all the Jews, but also dehumanize them. And to justify the Holocaust, they frequently compared them to vermin, including rats. So they put them on the same level as rats. So any reference to population control, selection, or, limiting population numbers, just the general thought experiment is something that I think really should be put into context here.
Yes. No, we have to make that really clear, and that's a really good point. And we'll get to the sort of the specific climate angle that I think Ray is referring to a little bit later. sort of I was thinking as I was researching, like, yeah, humans are kind of like rats, not in a way that like they're yucky and they just breed uncontrollably without care for their environment, but more just like rats, just like us. They're just trying their best to survive, and they do really well in urban environments. And yeah, maybe this was also prompted by one of the conversations that I had with a researcher that I interviewed for this episode, whose voice we couldn't fit in the end. He said this very thing as well. Let's hear from him.
The more I look at the rats, the more I think that they're a little bit like humans.
So that researcher is Thomas Aivalo. He's a biologist from Finland who works at the University of Leiden in the Netherlands.
I started my research with parasites, then moved into rats, and now interested in kind of like all kinds of biodiversity that is nearby to humans. But biodiversity that people don't really like that much, that we're calling like unloved others.
That's a good turn of phrase, unloved others.
So why does Thomas think that rats and humans are similar the more he studies rats?
Rats are very good at using the urban space. And the answer for humans always is why we are so successful is because we always accommodate the environment. And it's the same with the rats. They seem to be very good at kind of like adapting to the whatever environment there is. And the social flexibility of their systems, for example.
Yeah, and the success of the human species is certainly debatable given the circumstances we find ourselves in, but we'll leave that to one side for now. So, Neil, you might be asking yourself, Helsinki, what are we doing here?
I was. From the outset, when we were talking about this episode, Helsinki came up quite early, and there was like a special project there that you were briefing me on, and I was like thinking, Helsinki. I never associated Helsinki with rats. You know, I just get this image of a cold place, possibly a lot of snow, but rats, no.
Yeah.
So what's the story there?
Well, I came across this really interesting sounding research project called the Helsinki Urban Rat Project. And this is something that Thomas, who we just heard from, actually founded. This project started out as a disease ecology project. So the researchers wanted to track rat numbers and look at the kind of nasty diseases that rats are carrying. But then Thomas and his team just kept discovering that rats touch on so many different aspects of our lives in so many different ways. So the project expanded to cover culture, history, politics.
But I mean, if you were, just comparing Helsinki to New York, I mean, what is the difference there? I would assume there are more rats in New York than in Helsinki?
Way more. Way more rats, yes. Yeah, that's something that Thomas said, actually. He said a lot of what we know about urban rats and their behaviour comes from New York because it's such a great place to study rats because there are so many of them. But he said they have far fewer rats and they don't have these sort of big gangs of rats that are quite common in New York that are very territorial around the trash zones.
The rat gangs of New York.
I don't know if it's a term in the literature, but from what I heard, yeah, checks out. And he said they actually had to kind of go looking for rats in Helsinki, which was a little bit annoying because, they wanted a good sample size for their studies and stuff.
Yeah.
But they did do this one interesting research project in urban allotment gardens in Helsinki, which in Germany are called
Schrebergarten, singular Schrebergärten, plural. Yeah, yeah. It's Schrebergarten is something. I don't know, just perhaps for context, because I grew up in Germany, so I was aware of these places. I never really went to them, but you would always see these allotments on the outside of town, usually run by OAPs or retirees. I'm going into really a lot of stereotypes here right now, right? But they would, you'd see them in their shorts with sandals and white socks, and they'd be tending their immaculate gardens, super fencing, padlocks on everything, but it was all boxed in right next to one another, right? So it was like a community of these gardens, but they were very territorial and everything was really spick and span. So, I mean, personally, I'm not sure I would want to be a rat in that environment because I'm sure they would be after the rats very fast.
Well,
Yeah.
that is what happened, actually. They went to these urban allotment gardens to study conflicts between animals and humans, and they quickly found out that there was conflict happening between humans and rats, mostly coming from the human side. And basically there was some construction happening nearby that had disrupted rat burrows where they lived. And so they'd moved to the allotment gardens because they wanted shelter. And then they were like, oh, it's quite nice here, there's produce and seeds and some leftover food from the humans. But the humans really didn't want them there. And they actually invited Thomas to give a talk on rat disease ecology, and they kind of learned through this talk that they didn't need to be as scared of the rats and that they could actually implement some practical strategies to try and dissuade the rats from making a home in their gardens.
It was a really interesting story. So kind of like they had a rat problem, or some of the people in there had a rat problem. In the allotment garden, it was connected to this kind of like urban forest. So they didn't want to use any rodenticides there. And then they asked for pest management company to come in. The pest management company did their half a year of control, caught 10 rats, and the bill was like 2,500 euros. But in the end, kind of like the situation just mellowed out. There weren't many rats to begin with, and people learned how to kind of like deal with those rats. So not leave the food there for rats to be available.
So not leaving food there, but also they did some things like surrounding the foundations of their cottages with wire mesh, so that limits the nesting opportunities for rats. They also used closed compost bins to reduce the food supply. And some of them tried a couple of other things like sprinkling cat litter as a repellent, or, destroying small branches that could be used for nesting and things like that. So none of these methods involved poison, but they seem to be effective. Mm-hmm. And they also seem to just kind of come to a place where they accepted that they were literally out in nature, gardening, negotiating with wildlife, and doing so, you might encounter some rats.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that also, that's where this all gets a bit philosophical, I find, as well, the question of coexistence, right? Why should we be the ones who decide, who's allowed to live where? The rats were probably there, evolutionary, perhaps even longer than humans, but they've been there for a while, right? And they're in our space. We need to learn to live together, right? At least that would be my sort of common sense approach. I don't know, maybe your friend from the episode feels different about this. If your cellar's infested, you might have a different approach and feel like you just want to get rid of them. But I find it interesting to find an approach that is manageable without being cruel, without having these knock-on effects.
I think it's an ongoing negotiation, honestly. Like, as we say, they live here as well. I mean, this is something that we've been dealing with for hundreds of years. Like, to some extent, we have to accept that they're out there and we'll encounter them. But anyway, so we also do have to come back to this listener question from Ray. He did actually ask a question in his email. He asked about the ideal number of humans to inhabit the planet.
Yeah, and presumably he means the ideal number for a healthy environment and climate.
Yes. So we're not going to get into this too deeply, but I did just want to mention a couple of things that are important to keep in mind when it comes to discussions about population growth and climate and environmental impact. Because it is actually quite a common misconception that reducing the human population will help solve the climate crisis, will help address climate change. So researchers at a research organisation called Our World in Data, that's a non-profit research hub at Oxford University in the UK, they've done some good analysis on this, especially one data scientist, Hannah Ritchie. And there are just a couple of important points to make. So the first one is that if we want to avoid as much future catastrophic climate change as possible, we are looking at reducing emissions very dramatically in the next 15 to 20 years. Not a huge amount of time, and a shift in population big enough to matter to actually reduce emissions is not going to happen in that time frame. Demographic shifts take many, many decades to have meaningful climate impacts. We just don't have that much time. So Hannah wrote a really interesting article on her Substack called By the Numbers. And she says, changes in population are incompatible with the pace at which we need to decarbonise.
But that's also, very super interesting, but that is just referring to the climate crisis, right? It doesn't really factor in all the other things that we're doing, like, urban sprawl, land grab, the surface that we use, agriculture, etc. There are all sorts of other things that have an impact depending how many we are on this planet, right?
Yeah, no, you're right. that's primarily talking about emissions, so climate change. So us addressing climate change and the planet heating up. And the second point to make is that the world is very unequal and not everyone pollutes the same. So I guess you could apply that to emissions, but also some of the other methods of environmental degradation that you mentioned as well. So, for example, population growth is much higher in sub-Saharan Africa than it is in the United States or Europe. But in sub-Saharan Africa, the average annual emissions per capita are around 1 tonne. And in the United States, it is nearly 15 tonnes.
Yeah.
Also, population growth is slowing. The UN predicts that it will peak around about the 2080s.
But is it then, I mean, just what I'm taking away from that, it sounds to me then it's safe to say that it's more about how we live, not so much how many we are.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's things like transitioning to renewable energy, changing food systems, the way we consume, reducing waste, which almost brings us back to the rats.
It does, doesn't it? Oh. Well, I mean, we're coming to the end of the episode now, right? You did promise me that I could ask a few questions. I think I actually got most of them out of the way already.
Oh, good.
But, I mean, there was just one thing that I thought was kind of interesting also when you went out and did this episode, because also it opens up with your friend who's actually scared to go down to her cellar because of the rat, right? And so
The rat.
The rat or the rats.
Multiple rats.
Multiple rats, okay. So I was kind of wondering, I mean, it's from our conversation just now, you're not scared of rats, right? Or are you?
I don't think I am. Yeah. Not yet. I haven't been given a solid reason to be scared of rats.
Well, I'm wondering because, I mean, it was your friend actually that initially put this idea in my head, but I was wondering, because you've got the fear of, if we look at the fear of rats or mice, it ranks among the top 10 animal fears worldwide. I checked up on this, but the table is actually topped by spiders and snakes, which, I mean, those two phobias actually, to me, they make sense because just purely from an evolutionary perspective, right, those animals were quite venomous for us or deadly, so it made sense to keep away from them, or a lot of them anyway. But I mean, from what you discovered, in your research and also having talked to the rat whisperer, Bobby, would you say that the fear of rats is completely irrational?
I don't want to cast a judgment on people who are scared of rats. No, I wouldn't say it's completely irrational because of the disease factor, right? And the fact that they can destroy belongings and they can be super disruptive. So I wouldn't say it's completely irrational. Also, I don't like spiders. And I grew up in Australia, so I had plenty of exposure therapy.
That would have been my next question. Which
sorry.
animal is Charlie Shield scared of? Is there any animal, coming from Australia, the world top destination for venomous species?
Well, if I compare it to that, I don't have the same feelings whatsoever towards rats or mice. But if people feel like the way I do about spiders towards rats and mice, yeah, I mean, a large chunk of it is probably irrational. You?
No, I'm not scared of rats. I actually, I mean, there's one Pixar film, I'm not sure whether you've seen it, called Ratatouille.
Of course I've seen Ratatouille.
Sorry, okay. I don't know. But it's that film, I've seen it so many times now with my kids. It endeared rats to me. And I think, I feel sorry for them sometimes, the bad rap that rats get.
Totally.
And in that film, it comes across very well how this rat who wants to become a chef, and he's got this fantastic sense of smell and taste, and then he gets his break and he actually ends up working in a kitchen in Paris, and it's such a wonderful film. I don't know.
No, I agree. It's very sweet, and I think that's one of the few positive depictions of rats in popular culture, because most of them are some sort of like evil, slimy, cunning character.
But I mean, popular culture, that's also something I also find interesting in language. If you look at some of the idioms or sayings that we have, right? They're so, well, I mean, I don't know how many there are, but I mean, I can think of a couple off the top of my head, like rat someone out, or rat on somebody, or
rats.
Rats, yeah. Just as, cursing. It's all negative, right? It's got a connotation. It's a negative connotation.
Yeah, we have a lot of animosity towards rats, I think, in our culture. And I think that must contribute to the fear. It must be the same with sort of spiders and snakes too, right? They're never the endearing character in a film or a book or something.
Yeah. I think it's time we wrap up before we start talking about spiders, because then that's, yeah. That's where I tend to look over my shoulder.
Spiders?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you can do that episode.
Definitely not. That would be confrontation therapy for me. Gosh.
Thank you so much for listening and for getting in touch with us. A reminder that you can always leave us voice messages by going to dw.com/livingplanet and just pressing record. Or you can, of course, always write us an email. We read every single email and we love hearing from you. I'm Charlie Shield.
I'm Neil King, and our sound engineer was Jürgen Kuhn.